Hi, this is Britt. For anyone who is attending the meeting via telephone and you want to watch the meeting, you can do that by going to the city's YouTube channel, and there is a link on the city's webpage on the meetings page for the city's website.
So, Britt, it's nice to have you back. I will note that Ashley did an excellent job in your absence. So, also while presenting two items too. So, multitasking at the finest.
I knew she would do a wonderful job. She's amazing.
Very competent.
And thank you. It was nice to. I appreciate you letting me be gone. I noticed that someone else has joined by telephone. If you're trying to watch the meeting through the city's website as opposed to coming in through the city's Google Meet, you will need to go to the city's YouTube channel to watch the video.
And with that notice, it is 4 o'clock. It is March 16th, 2021. We are the Carmel-by-the-Sea City Council special meeting. Britt, could you do a roll call, please?
Sure. Councilmember Barron?
Here.
Burlito?
Present.
Tice?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Here.
Mayor Potter?
Yeah.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. Then we can proceed with this afternoon's business. First item then is public appearance. It's an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. Given the magnitude of tonight's agenda, I find it hard to believe there isn't something there that wouldn't qualify as being on the agenda, but we'll give it a go anyway. Is there anybody wishing to speak tonight?
Hello, this is Richard Kreitman.
Richard, welcome.
Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, I want to return to something I brought up to you before, and that's the threat to our village's economy and character by the conversion of retail spaces downtown to non-retail uses, particularly real estate offices. But I also see property management, investment firms, I think a mortgage company. And I'm not sure how many have occurred, but with so many retailers going out of business, there are open stores. And to refer to the retailers, additional offices of realtors downtown add nothing to our economy because they all share the same inventory. So the same number of homes are going to be bought and sold, the same property taxes generated, whether we have 20 or 30 or more retail storefronts, but realtor storefronts. But every time we convert a retailer to realty, we lose the sales tax that we would get from those retail stores. Now, I forget how long ago, it was about 2 years ago that we realized what was happening with the conversion of downtown apartments to short-term rentals, and the community and the council moved with incredible speed on that. The effect on our community, the long-term viability of the retail area and the attractiveness of the town to visitors and to ourselves as residents will be more affected by the number of stores that are closed and reopened as non-retail than would have been affected by that. So I'm asking that you seriously consider an emergency measure or to discuss this conversion. We have for decades managed the village by limiting the number of bars and wine tasting rooms and jewelry stores and art galleries and cosmetic stores was the latest, even hotel rooms. So this is something that we should address as a threat to the village and something that I hope you will take up on a later agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Is anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Britt, I'm leaving it up to you.
We only have 2 people attending the meeting via phone, which means if they're watching it, if they're not on the YouTube, we're live, so we don't have the delay, I believe, with the YouTube that we did with Granicus. So
All right.
I think you might be okay.
All right, then I'll close the public comment period and move on to orders of business. First item tonight is receipt of a presentation on a 5-year financial forecast and provide direction to staff. Chip, did you want to intro this before I hand it off to Sharon?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our presentation blends right from Sharon right into the CIP, so we can take a break in between if you'd like. And as usual, we'll tag team this. You'll hear me kind of try to add some flavor to the conversation or clarification or my the points I want to make. This is also meant to be a conversation with the council, so please feel free to raise your hand and stop us if we've been unclear, or before we move on to another slide, if you need to ask a question or what have you, please, council. I'm going to lead off by telling you again that this is a draft presentation tonight, the draft of our 5-year forecast. We've built into this forecast a lot of assumptions about returning revenue and future expenditures as well. There's things that you don't see in here that we're still working through. You'll also see a draft of our capital improvement plan and projects, a taste for what you may want to budget for appropriate funds for later this fiscal year. And then next year, we've got a draft list and then some out year. And then again, Bob will add some projects that didn't make the list that you'll see in the packet, but have been discussed by several of you or one of you or more. And we can talk about those as well. Just to recap, our 2021 budget process and budgeting was extremely effective. We had a conservative view of revenues. Those have resulted in a little bit more revenue than we had budgeted, which is a good thing. We had extremely restrained expenses. Just a smattering there, of course, is that we cut we've had basically no capital improvement projects are planned for this year. Everyone took a haircut, even me. Marketing took a haircut. The funding that we provide to Sunset Cultural Center took a haircut. Everyone took a haircut. In the next line, of course, I want to also thank the POA, which is our Police Officer Association, our legal department, the executive team. Everyone gave back to help balance this fiscal year that we're currently in, and we're very, very grateful. And hopefully, again, as my last bullet points out, we're going to come out of this and we're going to be okay. Maybe not next year, but on the out years, you can see, Council, that I think, again, our revenue projections will far outpace our expenditures, and we'll take care of all our obligations. We need to continue to celebrate that we have an outstanding credit rating. We got the highest credit rating available by Moody's as we went through the refinance of our lease obligation bond for Sunset Cultural Center. And so that was a real success, the refinance that will save well over $1 million over the next 10 years. That was a very effective decision on the part of council. And we passed Measure C right before the pandemic hit just about last year, about this time. And again, that will eventually reap some benefits as we glean increased sales tax revenue in the village. And boy, I thank Mr. Kreitman for his comments, and I owe him a cup of coffee for that. And I'd love to sit down and talk to him and you about what he said regarding the loss of commercial retail space in the village, especially on Ocean Avenue. We sent you a packet, and in that packet, we had a 5-year projection forecast table. We made some amendments to that table just yesterday, Monday, and you should have received a revised copy of that. The two significant changes, actually the only two changes, were we did add in, based on your previous direction, $1 million the next 5 fiscal years for our pension obligation. And again, this does not say that you're going to set up a Section 115 trust or pay it down directly to CalPERS, but we put that as a placeholder in there for your decision making as we go through this budget process. And again, we'll hear back again about our pension obligation based on your previous direction from March at our April 6th agenda meeting. And then last week, after we produced the packet, HR 1319, which is the House resolution, was signed into law by President Biden. We will receive, we're not sure exactly if we get it, I think we get it through the state, not through the county. We're not sure if that comes in 1 year or 2 year increments. Our calculation is that we'll receive $717,000. Again, those funds cannot be used to deal with our pension or UAL obligation. So again, I think we'll need to discuss how we spend that money. My recommendation is that we look at a kind of a premier project, something that really does something significant for the residents, maybe a capital project somewhere in the village that we can point to and put a small sign up thanking our federal government for that funding through the, whatever it's called, the American Recovery Act, HR, again, 1319, which is the way I know it. You have a number of non-mutually exclusive decision points tonight. We've talked about this before, nothing new here. We did cut $5 million from the budget. We'll be $2 million up on that $5 million at the end of the fiscal year. So we're still at a negative, a delta of $3 million from our previous fiscal year. We did cut 21% of our staff, 20 FTEs. Your choices, again, you don't have to do you don't do any of them. You don't have to do, they're not mutually exclusive. You can do parts of each of these. Rebuilding services. Again, we did cut a lot of staff. Ashley and I continue to talk about our inability to open both libraries 7 days a week with only 4 librarians that we have remaining on our team. There's a lot of other services that are pretty thin at this point in time because of the positions that we cut to balance this current fiscal year. The other item, of course, is that we didn't do anything for the residents. We didn't invest in capital, with the exception of about $140,000 worth of mandatory projects. You can invest more into our deferred infrastructure maintenance. Again, Bob is always happy to talk about that, and he'll talk to you about a little bit about that tonight. You will see in the draft forecast that we have built in, $829,000 into next fiscal year. You'll see that number is inconsistent with the ask list that Bob has, which is about 1.2 million. So there is about a $300,000 delta there. But again, we have a draft list for you today. We can talk about things, we can add things, we can delete things. This is merely a recommendation for some necessary investment. And the third, again, we've talked about this numerous times, is our pension liability, which continues to grow. And again, we did put a placeholder in there of $1 million for the next 5 years to deal with that liability. The punchline is, again, we're going to be okay. What you see in draft and what you will be seeing is for all intents and purposes, a kind of a status quo budget. We've not built anything fully back because we can't, because we don't have the money quite yet. But we are going to be okay, which is not the case with a number of other jurisdictions, not the least of which are on the Monterey Peninsula and Monterey County, who didn't have the foresight and wherewithal that the 5 of you and Councilmember Reimers had to really tighten our belts and project revenues that could have been worse impacted by the pandemic. So I'm happy to answer any questions now, or council will just turn to Ms. Friedrichsen and launch into an discussion.
Chip, great summary, much appreciated. Are there any questions of Chip by council now? I don't see any. Jeff?
Yes, question for you, Mayor. I have questions. I have some questions on both the first hearing and the second hearing. So are we sort of running them together, or are we just are we going to concentrate on the first? Is this the time for questions on the first hearing, Chip, or should I let Sharon do? I think I should let Sharon. I think there's still more of that to come. Is that right?
I would agree. I would think we go to Sharon, comment on that, and then we can go to Bob, comment on that. Again, this is direction only too.
But the first hearing on the agenda, not the second hearing on the agenda, right? I'm just being a little dense today. Okay.
Well, no, we'll go get Sharon's presentation and ask questions, provide any direction at that time. And when Bob gets down to the specifics of the capital improvement plan versus the 5-year forecast, then we can get even more specific. Does that work? Great. All right. Okay, Sharon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Please let me know if you have any difficulty in hearing me. Just as we set the stage on the financial forecast, it's important to remember that this is a planning tool that's really intended to aid the decision makers in making short-term and long-term decisions. We're really trying to project the fiscal environment in which the city operates within and try to determine whether there's a potential surplus or deficit each fiscal year. So again, a forecast is really a snapshot in time, much like the budget. It is fluid. It changes based on the assumptions that we're using within our forecast model and other externalities. So just a little bit of the preface of why we have the forecast before you. The current fiscal year summary slide really reiterates a lot of the comments that the city administrator started out with. Again, thinking of the context of when we put together our fiscal year 2021 budget was really in the spring of 2020 and on the heels of the emergence of the pandemic. So we were already facing known shortfalls in our revenue, and you can see that reflected in the difference between the adopted budget and the actual for fiscal year 1920. We did immediately curtail expenses where possible, keeping vacant positions unfilled, making efforts to reduce our capital outlay. In the end, we did need to use fund balance to close the deficit with our transient occupancy tax, but the combination of mitigating our spending as well as bringing in that fund balance did result in the fiscal year ending net positive. But you can see then as we developed fiscal year 2021, again, very conservative posture when it came to revenue, again, on the heels of the pandemic and trying to predict consumer behavior. As the city administrator reiterated, we made significant reductions in staffing and in capital projects, which is reflected in our operating expenses as well as the capital outlay. And we did, of course, have our required debt service. We'll delve into a little bit more of the assumptions for the current fiscal year, but we do anticipate our revenues coming in stronger than predicted. The city departments have been very mindful of their spending, and we're currently on track with our operating expenses. We do have savings and debt service related to the bond refinancing of the Sunset Center. And as part of the discussion later this evening, we are anticipating that there will be expenses for capital, at least for 2 urgent projects. And again, we are projecting, again, based on our performance to date to end the year with a surplus. Next slide, please. Again, just to reiterate, the real estate market is performing stronger than expected. Our transfer taxes are coming in higher. If the last part of the fiscal year continues on par with the first part of the year, we could be 100,000 over budget again in transfer tax. The purchase of goods, particularly online, as well as the consumer preference to travel and to spend was greater than predicted. As the city administrator mentioned, we do anticipate receiving federal assistance through the American Rescue Plan. Similar to other relief efforts, we should receive guidance from the U.S. Treasurer and or the State Department of Finance on the use of the funds and any reporting requirements. But we do know that based on the legislation, it is intended to respond to COVID-19 and the negative economic impact it has had on households, businesses, nonprofits, and certain industries. Similar to other relief acts, it provides funding for pay for eligible workers that are performing essential work. New for this piece of legislation, it does provide funding to government to really recognize the loss of revenue that many local governments faced as a result of COVID-19, while still continuing to provide government services as well as to provide additional services to address the pandemic. And also a new feature is that it allows funding for water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure investment. And as previously mentioned, it specifically excludes using the funds for pension. And again, as I mentioned, operational spending is on track, the debt service saving, and again, no council will be considering funding for the Sunset Center fire pump and the Public Works water filtration, as well as some other potential capital projects. Next slide. So as we get into fiscal year 21-22, and you can see that last column, I do apologize, the slide is hard to read, but you do have your 5-year forecast in your packet, which is a combination of the previous slide and this slide and the next slide. But really, as we're starting our budget process, we have to start with a framework of where we expect our revenues to be and where we expect our expenditures to be. As we receive direction on capital projects from council, work with the departments on their operating budget expenditures, we'll refine these numbers and bring that forward to council as part of the preliminary budget in May. So property tax projection is at just under 7.2. Now the question might be, since the preliminary estimated actual is 7.4, why would the projection be less next year? Again, we anticipate that the current fiscal year is a little higher than usual. We have some payments of prior year secured property taxes that occurred in December of 2020. We have that higher than usual transfer tax. So again, if you look at where we have been in fiscal year 19-20, 2021, and now 21-22, we like to have a conservative growth of 5% for property tax over the adopted budget. If we used the current year estimated actual for the projection, then we would just be building maybe artificially too high every year. So we, again, want to be realistic but conservative on the revenues. Our sales tax is again expected to bounce back up for next year as, again, the economy rebounds and reopens, more retail opportunities, more opportunity for indoor dining, but again, looking at a constrained environment with ongoing social distancing protocols. You can see your local sales tax really starts increasing, and again, due to that sales tax measure and increasing the sales tax from 1% to 1.5%, augmented with the recovering of the economy, we'll see hopefully next year and in the next 4 years thereafter, the sales tax really coming back up closer to that 4.5 million mark that we had anticipated last March before the pandemic. Transient occupancy tax, again, assuming an incremental return. A lot of the literature related to the travel industry anticipates a recovery of about 90% of the 18-19 levels in the early 2024. So again, an incremental approach based on our 18-19 actual, which was a very good year of returning to our TOT, 75% and 85%, 90, 95% through the next several years. Charges for services and other revenue, again, based on our adopted budget and a 2% inflationary factor. We do anticipate that most of the funding for the American Rescue Plan Act will be received this fiscal year, at least a portion. Any remaining funds that we don't receive would obviously roll over to the next fiscal year. Again, as we look at our salary and benefits, again, we are using the fiscal year 2021 adopted, and we've built in several assumptions related to salary and benefits that are outlined in your packet. But what's really important to note is we are basing this on our current staffing level. So again, any increase to the number of positions, any changes that are greater than our assumptions, including increased cost of salaries, rising cost of healthcare, other cost of benefits, would greatly impact that number. As council is aware, our unfunded accrued liability payment, the UAL, is increasing almost $200,000 for fiscal year 21-22. That's a guaranteed number from CalPERS at this point in time. Our service and supplies, we anticipate a 5% inflationary growth over our adopted budget. Our pension debt, again, you'll see it's a little lower in fiscal year 21-22. This is detailed in your packet. We do have the reduced payment for the Sunset Center for next year before it returns back to its $500,000 level. We do have the pension obligation bond and the NGen radio. So you do see, again, that savings that was enacted as part of the Sunset Center bond refinancing that occurred this fiscal year and next fiscal year, but then those payments will return in prior years. Pension mitigation, we have set aside $1 million as placeholder funding. Again, no specific use in terms of it being related to a trust or a buy down of the UAL, just money set aside for the pension. $829,000 for capital outlay, which is 3.5% of your projected revenue. And that does leave projected a surplus, again, as we start developing the fiscal year 21-22 budget and receive guidance from council. So expect those numbers to change in the next several weeks, and by the time you see the preliminary budget in May. Next slide. Again, just to reiterate, we do expect the revenues to really start recovering to our pre-COVID levels. As I mentioned, various assumptions related to staffing will increase the cost of the salary and benefit line. Again, the operating expenses for service and supplies is just across the board 5%, again, for forecasting purposes. We know that as we develop the operating budget, that we have several line items that to make up a large majority of the budget, like fire service. Currently, that's budgeted at $2.5 million. The marketing, which includes the Sunset Center and our various marketing partners, is budgeted just a little under $825,000. And we have other various contractual costs related to the cost of doing business, janitorial, trade care, legal, other specialized services. If these services are greater than 5% as we put together the budget, especially as we rebound from COVID and there's increased costs for any of these services, that will obviously have an impact on our ability to stay at 5%, and that may impact, the projected surplus at this time. The debt assumptions assumes no new debt or has factored in any lease financing at this time related to potential capital projects. And again, as I mentioned, the $1 million is for possible pension mitigation efforts. That would be $1 million of new funds, not using any existing funds the city currently has, such as OPEB reserve. Next slide. So again, tonight we really want to focus on where we expect to be for fiscal year 21-22 and really discuss the potential use of funds for capital projects. But again, it's important as we look at this current fiscal year to think where we'll be in the next several years as well. Again, you can see at the high level, and the detail is in your packet, that we do expect our revenues to incrementally return to normal, property tax to remain strong, sales tax to rebound over the next 2 to 3 years, and then incremental growth in the out years. Again, as I mentioned, TOT to really incrementally increase over the next several years. We expect our operating expenses to increase, primarily our unfunded accrued liability, our UAL payments, as well as just natural cost of living adjustments built into salary and benefits and services and supplies. Again, our debt service, you'll see in fiscal year 23-24, you'll see the reduction as our pension obligation bond matures, but our sunset Senate bond will still be in existence until I believe until 2032. Capital outlay, we've built in funding, again, based at 3.5% of projected revenue. And again, at this point in time, with a return of the economy and revenues returning to pre-COVID levels, maintaining operating expenses and capital expenses at the projection, we do expect that there would be a surplus in the next several years. Next slide. So that really is the part of the presentation related to the forecast. If there are specific questions from council on the forecast, I'm available to answer any questions.
That noted. Thank you, Sharon, for that presentation. Very insightful and very concise. Any questions at this time for her regarding the 5-year forecast? Jeff?
Thank you, Dave. I have a number of questions. First, Sharon, thank you most of all for that spreadsheet. It was invaluable in trying to ferret out where we've been and where we're going. It's a great tool that you and Chip have developed. So thank you very much for that. A few questions, over the course of the past, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, it seems like the money that we spend on our sort of green infrastructure kind of bounces back between the capital improvement project budget and the operating budget. And this is money for trees and a scenic pathway and the shoreline management plan and all those things. So where are the funds that should be allocated to those kinds of projects? Can I expect to find those in the capital improvement project budget, or can I expect to find those in the operating budget? Or I'm hoping the answer is not, that I can't expect to find those anywhere. So that's sort of the first question.
Sharon, you want to try to field that ground ball?
I'll start, and the city administrator and our public works director can weigh in as well. Typically, the capital budget truly is those projects that meet our definition of capital. And again, are those infrastructure and improvements as assets that you see in the ground, right? Vehicles, certain types of equipment, and again, those improvements, paving and things of that nature, that again have a certain lifespan and a certain dollar amount threshold, and that meets a definition of capital. I think in the last several years we've had maybe some special projects that warranted special attention, and some of those are in the capital budget. Some of those projects are currently in the operating budget. For example, the wildfire assessment study. I think as we start moving into discussions about the projects for the upcoming fiscal year, there are several that, if approved, would likely be housed in the operating budget instead. Again, the way we see the universe is those hard physical improvements of the infrastructure. There's studies that will lead to projects, such as last year, the storm drain master plan, or other assessment studies that would actually then lead to capital projects being built. And then we have this third category of really special projects that relate to other either operational improvements and efficiency enhancements or other community needs that address public safety, such as climate change studies or wildfire assessments. And again, those things plus facility maintenance would be housed in the operating budget.
So I'm gonna name a couple things, and I'm gonna try to ferret out where these things go, and I hope you'll correct me if I'm wrong. So maintenance on the scenic pathway, for example, some of that work. So if the city was doing some of the work that Carmel Cares is doing, that work would be housed in the operating budget. But fixing the pathway, so such as the items that were identified a few years ago in the shoreline management plan, such as the staircases and the landings and all those things, fixing those things would be found in the capital budget, right?
That is correct.
You're correct, council member.
Okay. What about the urban forest and the forest management plan? So it seems like we've fallen behind on taking out dead trees and planting new trees. So would that be considered a capital project, or would the sort of work plan for that work be funded out of the operating budget?
Councilman Brown, I'll be addressing that.
Funded out of the operating budget.
Well, with all respect, I think, so I know that you may be addressing that in the capital part of the budget, capital part of the discussion that's coming next, but this is an overall part of the discussion. Like, I would really like to know are those capital projects? So if I want to do those projects, do I need to allocate next hour, or do I need to advocate next hour, or do I need to advocate at the beginning of May when we have a discussion about the operating budget too? Like, Chip, do you have an answer for me?
So again, I think what Sharon said is if you have a plan that's eventually leading to what's going to be a series of a recipe or a menu of capital projects, then you would house that in the CIP budget. We do put items on the CIP budget so that we can highlight them, quite frankly, as well, so that we can celebrate them and they don't get forgotten by the public and the council, quite frankly, in the operating budget, because we do pool the money for our services and supplies in the operating budget by department, rather than, again, accentuating them individually in the capital budget. Does it answer your question, Mr. Barron?
I'm still a little lost. What I'm trying to do is figure out how to, I see Dave waving me down. What I'm trying to do is figure out how to not let those particular items get lost. And if you're going to tell me that they're going to be in the capital budget, then we'll talk about it in an hour. And if you're going to tell me that I need to go to the operating budget, then I'll talk about it at the beginning of the month. I'd just like to know sort of when staff would like me to talk about it.
Well, and it's up to the mayor clearly, but from my perspective, you can talk about them at any point in time. We have in the CIP on the last block, which are items to defer, we have a BRIT item, which is a retention schedule, which is retaining our paper. That's something we do physically with old documents. We have a facilities maintenance for older buildings. All our buildings are kind of old, $25,000. We want to highlight that in the budget for you as a CIP. You can actually even say the greenhouse gas emissions study, because it'll eventually lead, if you choose to go that route, it'll eventually lead to a list of capital projects that we need to do to address climate change. So again, that's a logical place, and I would say that would be synonymous with both our pavement management plan and our storm drain management plan. have I made it any more clear, or is it still obtuse, sir?
It's still a little obtuse to me. I mean,
So Jeff, if I might just for a second, I think I know where you want to go, and I don't disagree with you. But if you look at the actual description of a capital improvement project, it is, by the Government Accounting Standards Board, it is to include land, improvements to the land, easements, buildings, building improvements, vehicles, machinery, equipment, historical treasures, infrastructure, and other tangible or intangible assets that are used in operations that have initial useful lives extending beyond a single reporting period. So I think if you built something into the capital improvement plan that was specific, then it's a project specific and it becomes a capital improvement issue. If you look at the actual ones that are out there now, I look in here and you have the Mission Trails, design of 3 phases of Mission Trails Nature Preserve, the stream bed stabilization. You also mentioned the Mission Street, the upgrades to the scenic trail. That's a hardcore project, but if you wanted to go with a tree program, I'd suggest you build or bring forward a tree program that's built into the capital improvement program. That would be my suggestion, which is what I think you want to do.
It's actually so. Thank you for saying that, Dave. It's actually not what I want to do, because what I'd like to do is sort of get the council into the habit of funding some of these tree services just every year. Like Chip talked a few minutes ago, and Chip talked a few minutes ago about sort of highlighting projects. And I think one of the things that happens, for example, when we try to highlight projects, is last year we eliminated the CIP, and so all the tree work, whatever happened to be in the CIP, got eliminated. And it seems like every year the goalposts for this sort of green outside work sort of changes, and a lot of times it seems to just kind of get lost. A couple of years ago, we had $500,000 worth of tree work when a lot of trees came down, and that affected everything else, all the other tree work in the budget too. So I'm trying to figure out how to make it like paying down the UAL. Like, what I'd like to see, and we're still talking about this budget forecasting. So I think this is sort of an appropriate message for staff. What I'd like to see is, a sort of not a priority, but a spot in the operating budget that's carved out for maintenance. Basically, it's maintenance of the urban forest and maintenance of the scenic pathway. Like, these are things we do every year.
That may be a longer version of what I was just trying to say. Carrie, you have your hand up. I want to go to Bobby. Carrie, you're muted.
I think when the more detailed budget is presented to us, I believe that Public Works, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, the detailed Public Works budget will carve out how much is going toward trees in the forest. At that point, you can decide you want to put more money in there or not. But right, Bob, that's usually how I remember it.
Exactly.
Yeah, basically correct.
Exactly.
So I think what you're just looking at a lump sum here, Jeff. I think when they present the next detailed budget, that's when you'll see where how much is going toward some of these items that you're speaking of.
Bobby. You're muted.
Sorry, man. No, I think Carrie's right on. It's going to be the next, I understand that a capital project is a specific project. A operating is what we set forward for operating in a year-to-year basis. And within that operating comes a capital project.
Exactly.
That's correct, Chip? I mean, it's like a chicken and a chicken house.
Not the egg and the chicken. Chip.
Yeah, sure. Before the pandemic hit, we had specific line items for in the operating budget for work in Mission Trail Nature Preserve. We had the tree contracts, we had tree watering, we had tree planting, we had, but we had the North Dunes as a special CIP. So again, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but the answer is correct. We will, when we come back with the detailed budget, we will break out the services and supplies for those specific elements in the village that would come under the rubric of green infrastructure. And Mr. Barron is exactly correct. Again, pre-pandemic, I walked with the then president of the Friends of the Mission Trail Nature Preserve, and we were going to try to put on an annual basis a certain lump sum of money to complement their work and their money, so that we had a placeholder every year for maintenance for the Mission Trail Nature Preserve. But again, it's maintenance. It wouldn't be a capital project per se.
Jeff, you good?
I'm mostly good. I have a couple more comments for Sharon. At the end of your presentation, Sharon, you mentioned the OPEB, and I've had some conversations with Chip, and I'm not about this. And I think maybe we can let it slide going where we are this year. But I really would like to have a better understanding. I think the council should have a better understanding of what exactly goes into and comes out of that fund, because right now it just seems like there's money just sitting there in the bank. That doesn't, since we don't see that money being used for retirees' medical expenses or other things, it just seems like a static pool of money. And, I think last week, or I think at the last week's meeting or the meeting the month before, you mentioned that the right number, the accountant's number that we should have in the OPEB fund balance is really $4-something million. And I found that kind of alarming too. So I think maybe over the course of, if we can't get it done this month, maybe we could sort of get the OPEB house in order by the time we have the same discussion next year. That would be an ask. And then my only other comment, and thank you, Dave, for letting me say this, is that I find the capital budget outlay projections to be insufficient. Chip and I have talked about this. And I'm looking, Sharon has left this up on the screen for me, $938,000 in fiscal year 24-25. And I'm thinking about the roads. So we have 500, if we want the TAMC money, we have $530,000 a year in roads. And I'm also thinking about we have $10 million worth of storm drain projects. So if we do that over 20 years, that's $500,000 a year. And now we're out of money. And so something about the way that this projection is outlined doesn't work. And I think it's a problem that we, the council, need to fix. We need to, $938,000 a year is not enough money for the capital projects that we have. It's only going to fix the storm drains and the roads. And we have Sunset Center that needs to be painted, and the fire pump needs to be replaced, and we have the Scout House, and we have everybody's favorite projects, and we have the police station looming in the background that's just been put on hold. And Carrie has mentioned in the past that we need to find more money, and Karen has mentioned in the past that we need to find more money. And this is a perfect example of, I think, real world, we need to find more money. Like, we need to figure out how to not have only $938,000 in fiscal year 24-25. And I see that Chip, I know that Chip is over there thinking about that surplus number, $988,000 that's below it. But if the UAL situation turns bad, that money is going to disappear in a heartbeat. And so we're skating along and we're okay, but it still seems like we don't have the ability to do the projects that we really need to do just to maintain the village. And so I find this forecast to be very alarming, the way it's organized right now. And I think we should work on making it better, more attuned with the work that we actually need to do, rather than just here's how much money we have. So those are my comments. Thank you.
That's what we're doing tonight, is having a discussion. So I appreciate that. Carrie, then Karen.
Thank you, Jeff. I certainly wholeheartedly agree about finding another source of funds to make this spreadsheet look better when it comes to revenues and being able to spend money on capital. which is a huge part of what we have to do in this village. I am concerned about the staffing levels, assuming that even with, we haven't even gotten into the capital discussion, so depending on what we do there will depend on what the workload will be on the staff if we add more projects to the already cut back staffing. So I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the assumption of keeping the staffing levels. So I would like some discussion about that from Chip, or maybe coming back and saying, once we have the discussion about the capital budget, what is it going to take staff-wise if we need to hire back some positions? So that's one thing I'm concerned about.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, I hope that I didn't say it was a presumption on maintaining our existing staffing. It's really up to the council. And you know, as we've said, if we build back a robust capital project list this year, we're going to need a human body to implement it, to manage that capital work. We're going to need some other help to help facilitate. We cannot open either library for any duration of time with 4 staff members. So that's where, again, I'm going to need your guidance, and maybe a little bit tonight, a little bit more on the 6th, and we'll continue to hone that. And again, you do have a little bit of money that's surplus to play with. There's, you know, we put $1 million into pension mitigation. It's hard not to, you know, my desire is to get rid of that debt. It's hard not to want to. It's like an interest only mortgage payment, for crying out loud. We're not getting into the principal. So that's a big number. But again, if you trimmed a number like that and you were more comfortable with less of a surplus at the out years, we can broaden both the capital work and talk about building back some services that we had to cut. So that's the kind of the gore of the spear that we're moving toward, and getting your direction on some of those things, Madam Tice.
I'm sorry, Carrie, go ahead.
You know, we haven't gone out to the public yet, so these are mainly questions, and they're questions that I'm also putting to the council and the public. You know, you've got money set aside for pension mitigation at $1 million. Maybe that has some wiggle room in terms of a little less, so that we need to find $300,000 for the suggested capital. So maybe it's not $1 million. Maybe the council decides it's going to be a little less, but we still do put some money toward that issue. So thank you.
Bobby, I think Karen, did you have your hand up first? I can't remember.
Yes, I did.
All righty. Well, I don't want to step on your political toes, so go right ahead.
Okay, I hear what Councilman Barron is saying about the green infrastructure, and I have that same concern. Somehow, you know, when our sales tax measure was sold to us, green infrastructure was emphasized a lot in that. And I think the residents really believe that if we pass this sales tax revenue, we would start to see more green infrastructure projects. Now, that being said, we always have things like engines blowing up and pumps blowing up and other things that come along. But I would like to see a method. I understand what Councilman Barron's saying, that sometimes it seems to disappear and we don't really see some of it. And when it goes from capital budget into operating budget and maintenance, you know, it's just sort of amorphous. So I would like to see a little more money put in on an every year basis that the public can actually see happening. I also wanted to mention that when we bring back staff, that will take a certain amount of time, and it could take up to 6 months or so. So we will still have some money that is not being spent on that staffing until they come on board. And I think Chip said that that might take as long as up until, say, January to get people back on board. So that is a little bit of money that is probably there for us to work with as well. And, this is a learning curve for me to sit through and learn all about these different funds and so on. So I really appreciate all of your comments and your questions so far. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Karen. Bobby?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So while I appreciate that we try to look how to find more money, I think that looking at this, it's also important to look where to save money. And I think that there are opportunities for us to save money. For example, if we would have had that pension fund trust, then we would have paid that CalPERS bill earlier, and we would have saved $60,000 or something like that. Am I correct, Chip? So there, right there, I understand why we did it because of cash flow, but right there, if we would have had that trust, we would have saved $60,000. So it's not so easy just to go find money. Sometimes it's easier to protect money or save money. And I would like us to take a hard look at that. But I do believe Carrie's right as far as this hasn't gone out to the public yet. And so I don't really have any real questions other than, if I'm correct, we're throwing the number 300,000 is the difference between what we think we'll earn and what we think we'll spend. Is that correct, Chip?
I'm sorry, sir. I think the delta I was talking about is what we've budgeted for capital outlay, and
Right.
and Bob's Christmas list, and it's it's $370,000.
Right. That's what I have. $358,000 is for the Bob's wish list is 1,187,800. What we're projected to outlay is 829, and that's not including the $160,000 that we're dipping into on a budget that we weren't going to dip into. And that's for the 3 projects that we'll talk about later. So anyway, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor. I just wanted to get that across, as I would like to make sure that we're saving money as well as trying to find more money.
Well, having let the parameters of questions wander just a little bit, I'll take it out to the public before we come back to any comments on the 5-year forecast. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak on this tonight?
Richard Kreitman here again.
Welcome back.
Again, something we're going to find the money. The only place to find additional revenues of the quantity we need to address our capital needs, our capital requirements going forward, is the real property transfer tax, which I've written to you. Boy, we missed an opportunity over this last year. God knows there's probably $500 million worth of property changed hands in our 93921 this year, as opposed to the normal $250 to $300 million. But anyway, you guys will get to that. It will require going to a charter city, and it'll be good for several $1 million a year going forward. And I think that's where we're gonna find our capital projects funded. I did want to comment specifically on sidewalks, but I think that's the next discussion, so I'll let that go. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Is there anybody else wishing to comment?
Mayor, I think, again, we have several people who have joined through the telephone, and the delay is not as long as it used to be, or how long it is with Granicus. So I think we might be okay with me kind of stretching the way I just did.
All righty. Well, then I will go ahead and close the public comment period on this portion of the agenda. Council, any closing comments regarding the 5-year forecast? Jeff.
Thank you. A question for Chip. What is the estimated? What's the situation going to be with respect to what's staff's estimate of where the budget is going to be surplus or deficit wise at the end of June?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Barron. We're expecting a $2.5 million surplus, $2.6 million surplus there. You see where Sharon's cursor is to close this fiscal year.
So that's right now, as we sit here, if the council doesn't do anything, not necessarily next hour, but next year, that $2.6 million is going to go into the general fund balance.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yeah, so I have some thoughts about that. I don't think, I hear Councilmember Richards saying that we should save money. And I think that saving money with a purpose is good. We, the council, are charged with protecting the city. And I think we did a good job of protecting the city at the beginning of last year when we trimmed everything out of the budget. We trimmed the budget to the bare bones, and because of the vagaries of COVID and what's happened, we're now left with a $2.6 million surplus. And I know that we've had some renewed interest, thank goodness, in funding the UAL, which is good. And I know that Councilmember Richards and others want to put money aside into a savings account or whatever for future changes to the UAL, and I think that's also good. To me, that's savings with a purpose. Let's save some money so that we can, not pay that $60,000 or insulate the city from the vagaries of CalPERS or whatever it is, or we can just give that money to CalPERS like prepay some of the UAL. But last year, at the beginning of the year, out of precaution, we eliminated the entire capital improvement project budget. And, I would like to see personally that we refund, we put some of those projects back on the table, not just the three projects that are outlined, by staff, but that we take a hard look at, just refunding some of the projects, whether it's the Scout House or whether it's the scenic pathway improvements, those sidewalks and the staircases and the landing that are in such disrepair. There's a lot, or whether we put it towards the storm drain plan, whether we refund the police station, a $1 million project, which we may never have $1 million, a year to do. I think we should put that money to work for the people that live here and not squirrel it away in a bank account. So I think that there's a balance between saving money, as Councilmember Richards wants and as I want, especially for the purposes of the UAL, and spending this money to replace basically the entire lost year of capital improvement project budgets. And I think that's something we should consider. Thank you.
And to Jeff, I might just say that I don't disagree with you that if we have money that was not going to jeopardize our credit rating, investing that in projects is a good idea. I just don't want to spend our dollars down to where our credit rating's in jeopardy, because we do need a part of our credit rating is based on our reserves. So, Carrie?
So I agree with Councilmember Barron in terms of before the end of the year, we need to have a discussion on how we're going to spend some of this money. This is basically a $3.5 million shift. We were expected to go 1 million into our reserves, and now we're not going into our reserves. We're actually have 2.6. Now, budgeting conservatively is great. Because of COVID, we needed to do it, but now we're out, we're feeling a little better. You know, people were grumbling about some of our tourism, but that has basically saved us this year. I need to say that. And we've still stayed safe. So I think there were people that made sacrifices this year to a tune of about $150,000 in salary savings. I think we need to take a look at that. And I think we need to take a look at some projects that we would feel comfortable getting going because we were smart and we did budget conservatively. A lot of cities are not in the type of shape we're in. So we're, you know, I appreciate the staff being conservative. That's the way I like to budget myself. But now I think we don't need to spend all the money, but I think we need to spend some of it. And I'm hoping that in the next couple months, it's going to come back to the council so we can. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Karen.
Yes, I feel similarly. That is a lot of money that can accomplish a lot of wonderful things for our village, both for residents and for sprucing up our downtown and making parts of our village safer. And I am all for coming up with a wonderful list. This is a great problem to have, excess surplus money. And I think that our residents deserve to see this money spent on some of the things that they will enjoy on virtually an everyday basis. And certainly our urban forest is at a tipping point. Our pathway needs work. We need a good fire response plan that people can see that we're doing something about. So I think it's time to open up the purse strings here in a responsible way, but definitely get some projects going. We need to feel good about what's happening this next year because we've all hunkered down and made a lot of sacrifices over this last year. So we have to make up for some of that lost time. Thank you.
Bobby?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm not in of the mind to save everything that we have. I am of the mind of putting a bit of money into our village, but I would like to go over these capital improvement projects with a really, really discerning eye so that we do things that we absolutely need or that absolutely will save us money in the long run. But we need to figure out what those are, and we need to be judicious with the taxpayers' money. And I think we all agree with that, but maybe we just have different values on what that is going to look like. I just hope that we can go through this project list with a very discerning eye and hopes to continue to be prepared like we have been. And I'm so proud of this team and the administration that we are coming out of this, hopefully coming out of this in such decent condition.
Chipper, you have anything you want to say before we move on? So I would just comment on the value of a 5-year forecast. This is my 27th budget, and I'm back when I first got in the budgeting world. We just did 1 year at a time. And that's really planning in a vacuum. You really can't figure out where you are unless you took down the road a few years and say, okay, here's where we are. One of the things maybe we should do is spend some money this year and program some money in the next year. I mean, honestly, I'm not opposed to that. I think we're also on the same sheet here. We just want to be responsible with the public dollar. But I think that the 5-year forecast is an excellent tool for long-range fiscal planning. We didn't have that 27 years ago. I'm really glad we do now. So we're lucky to be able to have a forum where we can have this debate too. It's a very good discussion. I like a spirited discussion anyway. I think it's a value, and that's what this tonight is all about. It's giving some preliminary direction, and then as Bobby just said, we can wire brush it. One of Chip's favorite sayings is wire brush it. We can wire brush it all we want. That said, why don't we go on then to the capital improvement part? I believe, Bob, you're taking the floor now.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Okay, so here's the agenda for the next series of slides. We'll go over the CIP definition. We kind of already touched base on that. We did complete a few projects in the current fiscal year. We have 3 urgent projects that we're going to be recommending funding for April, but this was just kind of be to introduce those 3 projects. Then we have 13 new CIP projects recommended for 2020-21. Actually, that should be 21. Yeah, that's right. 6, fiscal year 21-22 special projects funded by operating budget or by volunteers and donations. We have more than 13. I added a few that have come up in recent days. Previously considered projects for subsequent 4 fiscal years to be included in the 5-year CIP. I think Chip will make some comments about staffing, questions regarding the CIP at that point, open up to public comments. And at some point, we'll need council's guidance for the big picture is the amount of allocation for capital versus allocation for pension and allocation for city services. And then at the end, we'll have council's opportunity to make your first round of selection of projects. And again, you're not voting on locking in anything at this point. We're trying to narrow down the list. CIP definition.
Bob, if I might just for 1 second. One of the other things I think would be is we get further definition on projects also. If we don't have to, we're not going to come to 100% finance decision tonight necessarily, but if you have additional questions, now would be the time to pose those questions.
Absolutely.
So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think that's important.
Okay, so what we've been using as capital improvement project definition, it ties in with the Government Accounting Standard Board. It would be for us over $10,000 in value, have a useful life of over 10 years. And it's usually a fixed asset, but it could be a vehicle, and storm drain repairs or building renovations or an ambulance would qualify as capital improvement. Maintenance and operation projects are still considered with the CIP, but they are not capital projects. These are projects that belong in the operating budget of the applicable departments. However, because they're big ticket items, we present that tonight so that they can compete with the other capital projects. So if funding is tight, there should be, what allocation will be for capital projects and these other types of projects. But we want to look at it holistically. And examples of this would be the wildfire risk plan or the stormwater ordinance update. By the end of this fiscal year, there's 3 projects that we completed in one way or another, thanks to the help of Carmel Cares, volunteers, and donations. The scenic pathway renovation phase 1, the landscaping, if you were to look at it today, it's in far better shape than it was a year ago. So they really made a lot of improvements. There's still a lot more to do, especially in the hardscape, which would be phase 2. Carmel Cares / Carmel Gives donated a multi-purpose utility vehicle with a water tank. That was in our 5-year CIP in year 2, so it was advanced by a year and a half. And ADA upgrades year 3, finishing up. We made some ADA improvements in the First Murphy Park, Devendorf Park, and we're working on Piccadilly. These are the 3 projects that will be coming back to you at the April 6th council meeting. The first one is an emergency fire pump materials and installation. This is an emergency situation. We have already ordered the parts because of a long lead time item. It's 8 weeks. The parts were about $52,000. So we'll ask council to ratify that purchase and also to award the construction contract for installation of those materials in April. Next is a greenhouse gas emission study for climate action plan. This is one of the projects that would potentially lead to future capital projects. So again, it's competing with capital for dollars. And this is from obviously the Climate Committee, and you heard a presentation made at your March 2nd meeting about that. And last is a water filtration system at our Public Works yard. We already received some quotes, lowest is $17,000. We have to do this to meet environmental regulations. And the current system is really obsolete, and it breaks down quite often. Okay, so here's really the meat. These are what the staff is recommending for the next fiscal year for capital projects. And we know full well that the 1.1 or 2 million exceeds the $829,000. The reason that we're giving you a menu of projects, and we're asking council to narrow it down, okay? Because all of these projects are warranted and needed. The first one is the 2019-20 annual paving project. This was funded previously. The design was 90% complete. When COVID hit and the project was defunded, this is the same status. We were at 90% complete. What we could do is defer the San Carlos meeting islands and the bike route from this project, save a few dollars. But we do need to meet that 571 for the maintenance of effort that's required to get state and TAMC funds. Combined, we would be getting $348,500 of external funding if we pay the 571 now. The question or the comment is, if we defer this project another year, in the second year, we would need double the 571 for maintenance of effort to be able to qualify for those fundings. So most agencies just keep going with the maintenance of effort amount each year. Next is the police department radio antenna. The chief anticipates a $175,000 grant in October. So this is a $375,000 project. The city would need to contribute $200,000. Next is the design repair.
Bob, if I may, I mean, what you're going to see here, Council, is a bunch of public safety projects, ambulances and police vehicles that are well beyond their useful life, and then this antenna. And you saw a more in-depth description in the agenda packet, but I can't stress enough how important the antenna is. We have difficulty talking to other agencies. We have difficulty talking among ourselves. And you'll see another for radios themselves, which are well beyond their useful lifespan. And I want to compliment Chief Tomasi, fought off Santa Clara County and all the bigger counties to get what's called UASI money. I have no idea what the acronym stands for, but again, he was successful, and it's a real word, UASI, getting $175,000 grant. So I really can't stress enough the importance of our grant match in this one. Thank you, Bob.
Urban Area Security Initiative grant.
Okay. Next is the survey master plan. We noted that there was broken pipes and we have a lot of bottlenecks. We don't, Councilman Barron mentioned $9.9 million is needed to fix our whole system. There's no way we need all that at now, but we need to get started on the design. So I'm suggesting that we spend $100,000 to start the design process of fixing the most urgent repairs. But this would be just the beginning of a many year program of repairs. Next is do some hazardous material testing and remediation and repair the worst windows at Sunset Center. The next is an ambulance. The thought here is to pay off the ambulance of $275,000 over the next 5 years. So that would be an ongoing debt, which is not built into Sharon's 5-year projection at this point. So it's up to council to see if we wanted to go forward with that. The dispatch renovation was included in the big police renovation project, but this room cannot wait. It's been a real challenge. It needs to be renovated. We did what we can with the staff we have, but we need to invest more money to make that room usable because it's occupied 24/7. Next is to replace 2 of the older police vehicles. One was from 2012, the other was from 2014. We think that this, combined with all the equipment and interest over the 5 years, it's about $150,000 total item. And our requesting is $30,000 for the next fiscal year. These are also proposed projects for the next fiscal year. Number 11 is police radios. Police need 22 radios at their cost $8,200 each. Similar financing, it would be $30,000 for next year. Mission Street sidewalk repairs. We have $15,000 from TAMC from the RSTIP funding. So we have that. That was just the leftover for the amount that they gave us. We also did traffic painting and striping, and we installed EV chargers from that pot of money. We have $15,000 left. We can't do the bad area of Mission Street sidewalk. We need $21,000 more. The good news is that that $21,000 would qualify as part of our $571,000 for the MOE. If we didn't want to do the paving project, then this would be $21,000 we stand alone. Next is Mission Trails Nature Preserve to begin the design of the first 3 of 8 projects that is recommended by the Stream Stability Study. If you recall, a few months ago, Council accepted $187,000 per capita grant in the Park District. It requires a 20% match. We don't need the construction funding at this point, but we wanted to begin on the design next fiscal year. And we're asking for $20,000 for the match to get the design and the environmental permitting done. Next is our annual ADA transition plan upgrades. This year was $16,000. I didn't think we spent quite at all. Next year we can go with $15,000 and just keep going. And that would be an ongoing program of projects. Number 15 is a backup generator at Park Branch Library. This was under review at the last council meeting. We tried to get a low interest loan from Central Coast Community Energy. We do qualify for the loan, but they really wanted to have the whole building upgraded. And we don't think that that's worth the investment at this time anyway. And also we have a number, it's not highly scientific yet for the COVID reopening modifications. I believe later on this week, we'll be receiving a report from a consultant who inventoried all the buildings and looked at the points of contact between staff employees as well as staff and the public. So he'll be making recommendations shortly. So we'll have a more refined number, but for now it's $10,000. So the grand total of all those 13 projects was 1.1 million. Again, knowing full well that the tentative budget for capital projects is 829. The hard part is to sliver these projects down. The good news is that we do have other projects that don't really cut into our available funds. First one is Ocean Avenue's fencing. We have not designed the fence. We don't know how tall the fence is, but we do know that the Carmel Resident Association wants to give us a donation to do a split rail in the ocean medians, and they would certainly go to the Planning Commission before that's installed. The wildfire risk assessment plan was in the current year budget, but it was not, I'm not sure if it's not started. We certainly tried to get tag team with city of, or actually with local fire agencies, I should say. And that's still kind of up in the air. What we want to do is just roll over the funds we already have into the next fiscal year operating budget for the fire department. Again, that's not a capital plan, but that $20,000 competes with everything else. Wayfinding signs was approved by council at the March 2nd meeting. That's $18,500. Next is the North Dunes interpretive signs, fencing, biological monitoring. What we're recommending is the money we received from a mitigation and donation from June Overett, which is we have $12,250 left over to roll that money forward into next fiscal year so we can keep doing the biological monitoring. And there's some preliminary talk with the Rotary Club and Carmel Cares about possible paying for signage and other fencing and other upgrades. 21 is just be aware that Carmel Cares has a big list of projects that they're looking at doing. This is all done over the oversight of myself and the forester and the public works superintendent and other staff as necessary. We talked about split rail fencing at the North Dunes, but also they'll be doing the work at Forest Hill Park on the west side. We've asked them to enclose our dumbwaiter at the Park Branch Library that we never use. The ADA, the observation deck at First Murphy Park above the bathrooms. That needs a lot of work and it needs to meet ADA, so that would be an interesting project. The wooden barriers along Scenic Pathway. It is in our coastal development plan. We might not need to go to the Coastal Commission, but we're not sure. But anyway, they want to pay for our wooden barriers, and it's already designed, and we can go forward with that. And city entry signs, and the thought is that they would match the style of the wayfinding signs. So again, none of those projects are for sure. If the council wants to eliminate any project, now would be the time. Otherwise, we'll go full steam ahead and try to get those done. Last is the energy efficiency projects coming up from our Site Logic firm. This will be for long-term savings. The first project that they're going to be recommending, we got a preview last week, is solar panels at the Vista Lobo site. So lots of interesting ideas to save us money in the long run. they know that we would have little to no capital funding for anything, but there's grants, there's unbilled financing and whatnot. We talked about Carmel Cares, which has been doing a great job for us. Carmel Gives. They have 3 programs under them. One is median minders, where they have local residents maintaining our medians, which is fantastic. A pickup posse is picking up trash, and tree tenders are growing new trees. So this is a citywide effort, but they're not the only volunteer group. And I narrowed it down to just infrastructure focus because we have volunteers all over the city. But we want to put a shout out to the Carmel-by-the-Sea Garden Club, the Friends of Carmel Beach, the Friends of the Forest, the Friends of Philander's Mansion, the Friends of the Lester Browntree Native Plant Garden, the Friends of Mission Trail, Park Nature Preserve, the Lions Club, the Me Earth students, Pillow Beach Vineyards, the Sanctuary Foundation, and the Wheaties. So we're getting lots of help, and we really appreciate that. Okay, next we're going into the 5-year CIP. The benefits of a 5-year CIP is to plan ahead. If you recall our little graphic here, new infrastructure at the beginning of time is brand new. It's wonderful for a long, long time. It's satisfactory to fair condition. When it gets to the blue bubble point here, it's going to start to decay or deteriorate rapidly. So we want to do is spend $1 to fix it here versus waiting in a short period of time and having to fix it at this point, which is 4 or 5 times on the typical generic rating. But we want to renovate our infrastructure at the blue dot. In the 5-year CP, only year 1 would be fixed at the time of adoption. All of future years are very flexible. It does identify opportunities for bundling projects or for phasing projects. For example, we don't need the construction money for repair of storm drains that are broken. We just need money for design, and then the following year we can start constructing those. It takes time. The 5-year CIP also gives us more realistic schedules, and it's just really an inventory of prudent projects to look at over the next few years. Okay, now these next 13 projects were under discussion or were funded and then defunded when COVID hit. So I'm bringing it to your attention because it's certainly easy to take these projects from the 5-year, move them up, and move other projects down, or to add or delete or modify any of these projects, but here they are. First one is the police building renovation. To complete, go for construction, we would need about $1.4 million. If you recall the bids, our cost estimate was about $1 million. The bids came in a little higher, and plus with the 10%, we would need about $1.4 million. The Harrison Memorial Library, if we were to do exterior and interior painting and carpeting with a ballpark of $300,000, that possibly could leverage a lot more money for donations for interior renovations. This was talked about a year ago. The well decommissioning and the elevated tank removal at Mission Trail Nature Preserve is a safety issue. It's environmental liability. It needs to be done. It's just a matter of at what point in time are we going to do that? Next is the Climate Committee has requested a sea level rise / coastal engineering report. Preliminary estimate is about $150,000, depending on the level of sophistication we want that report to be. This is something that we're looking at, possibly tag teaming with other local agencies, and they're qualifying for any FEMA funding. Don't know yet. Backup generator for IT. We do have quotes. This would be for the main library, $60,000. The reason this has been held up is because of the lack of space on how we're going to install that. But I think we do have some ideas, and if we allocate the funding, we can get it done. Scout House renovation design was if you recall, our roof was reinstalled. So that's wonderful because the thing was it was raining in the building for decades. So now it doesn't rain in the building anymore, which is great. If we want to get the design going forward, we're recommending $40,000. It's not that it's a hard design, but it's challenging with ADA to meet ADA requirements. The computer servers could use a boost in resilience for $35,000. The next one was part of that paving project. We just advanced it forward. That's the San Carlos Street bike route and landscape medians, which I know the community is interested in. It does reflect the $17,000 donation we received a year or two ago. But if this were to be a separate project, it would be $25,000, or we can merge it back into the paving project. Facility maintenance, what we're finding is that our older buildings are requiring repairs faster, more and more often. Recently we had a week of just plumbing repairs, and everyone was kind of urgent. So we're trying to keep up with what we have the best we can, but we're going to need to increase our budget in one way or another, whether it's a capital project or put in the operating budget. But those buildings are, we have some problems. Retention schedules, Chip mentioned about that. That's the city clerk's recommendation. We believe we'll have sufficient funding in this current fiscal year, so maybe we don't need to mess with it in the next year or so. So that remains to be seen once the proposals are reviewed. The GIS, we have a great foundation of a GIS system, but it doesn't have applications yet. We're hoping to get started on a permit system application, which would really improve staff efficiency. We get a great economy of, a great value working with the Chico State Geographic Department. So that would be money well spent when we have that funding available. Uninterrupted power supply for IT, another request for IT, $20,000. And we, sooner or later, we'll need a consultant for a stormwater ordinance update. Right now, staff doesn't have the capacity. We do have much of the expertise, but not all of it. So we will need some help from a consultant at some point in the future. Extra bonus projects. Well, these were not in your packet. These kind of came since then. And there's more. But here's what we have. We have a street sweeper for $175,000. This would be in year 2 in the next 5-year CIP. My recommendation is that we focus on the ambulance first and then the street sweeper second, if we're going to go that route. Vista Lobos renovation design should be done, so we started someday. The library has been begging for a master plan of $50,000, and that would set the tone for future projects, future capital projects from there. The ambulance needs an automated exterior defibrillator. I don't know if I got that right. $25,000, and that would be housed at the fire station and used when they go to service calls. And then another one is forestry management plan, $20,000. We do have sufficient funding in our reforestation fund. And in fact, the reason we don't have a new capital project called tree growth or whatever is because we have some money in our tree restoration fund. And we could be using that money to do quite a bit on trees. We also have been, we do have some money for tree contractors, and that's been helpful for the larger trees, but staff, public works staff and forestry have been able now to remove dead trees that are small, like as before, but also medium-sized trees. So we've got better equipment. We're saving tons of money by being able to remove mid-sized, smaller trees in-house and only contracting out the big monster trees. And anyway, we can go on and on and on with other projects, but you get the idea. So here's what we're asking council for guidance, and I'll return to this slide in a little bit. First is confirmation to proceed with the 3 urgent projects using the current fiscal year funds. We're not asking for approval. We're just confirming if these are the 3 projects that we should be going to council with at the April 6th council meeting. Next is the harder part, is to review and prioritize the 13 proposed projects for the upcoming fiscal year, or now's the time to delete, defer, or add any other projects to that next fiscal year. Then we're asking you to confirm to proceed with the 6 projects that are funded by others, or some of these are carried over funds. Next is to review and prioritize the 13 additional projects previously considered in the 5-year CIP. For those projects, again, you can delete, defer, or move forward, and or you can certainly add additional projects to the 5-year CIP. And of course, we want to incorporate any public comments we get and discuss the project manager position. That's part of the equation to get these projects done. With that, I'll answer any questions, and just to look ahead, we'll be looking at these charts again for your preliminary selection of projects. So this is a look ahead when we get to that point. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions and then turn it over to council for guidance.
All right, Bob, I just might exercise my priority as the mayor and ask you, why would we have to fund and send prioritize? Seems to me if we say we want to fund it, gets done as quickly as possible within that calendar year. For us to go ahead and try to drive the train on making it happen quicker seems more that's for your priority than ours, or your prerogative than ours.
I agree.
All right, so if we fund it, that means we want to prioritize regardless of where it is, whether it's number 1 or number 8 or 9 or 10 or 13.
I think I was referring to prioritizing over the other categories of projects.
All right, okay. All right, Carrie, you had your hand up, sorry.
I have a couple questions, Bob. The top 13 here, can you go back one slide? Hold on. For the 13 projects that you want to fund in 21-22.
That's on the screen now.
Okay, these are them. That's correct. So a lot of these are equipment, so that doesn't take much staff time. What about the drainage system repairs? Is that, who's going to do those?
We need someone to oversee the consultant who would design these repairs.
Okay. The Mission Street sidewalk repairs, is that our staff?
We actually drafted the specifications. Yes, we could do that project in-house if we had to.
Mm-hmm. And how about the ADA upgrades?
But let me back up for a second. We would hire a contractor to do the Mission Street sidewalk, but we could finish the design and oversee the contractor with our in-house staff.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
My mistake, I was muted. Jeff?
Thank you. Because thought maybe my speaker was turned down. Bob, thank you, Carrie. Carrie, I had the same questions on those. A question about the vehicles. You know, the city has a vehicle and equipment replacement fund. Would the money for the ambulance and the other vehicle, the police department vehicles, come out of that fund?
I know the fund was running out of funding, but I'll turn that over to Sharon to answer.
Councilmember, correct. I have to look at our current balance, but part of that fund could be used for some of these purchases. The intent of that fund is also really to build up money within the account so that when these projects, such as the replacement of an ambulance or police vehicles occurs, we have enough funding in the vehicle equipment fund, so that really it should be served as a depreciation account. But we have been using the funds in the last couple of years to augment our capital budget. But I'll have to look into how much we have available in that fund and get back to you.
Do you want? I see Chip getting ready to answer, but we have $946,000 in it, according to the number from last year's budget. And I'm surprised that, with the exception of the fire truck, I don't think we have $946,000 worth of vehicles, do we?
Certainly do not.
Well, we depreciate them, so that 946 is most of the money is in the fixed asset, as you're correctly identifying, Mr. Barron, $780,000. So there's about $160,000 in available funds to, that's cash to purchase new vehicles. What we should be doing is we should be depreciating all our vehicles on an annual basis and putting 1/5 or 1/7 of the value into this fund. But again, it just becomes a cash flow problem.
So we could use some of that money to fund the ambulance and the police cars, the police vehicles.
We could, with your direction. Again, it's meant to be a kind of a savings account of sorts. It's got $165,000 in it. We'll confirm that number for for one of your next meetings. But yes, sir, if the funds are available and you authorize that, yes, sir, we could do that.
So I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused. So you say the fund, so on the budget, it says $946,000, but not all that is cash?
No, most of it isn't. So almost $800,000 are the value of the fixed assets, the value of the fire truck, the residual value of the ambulance, the value of our police cars, the value of our backhoe.
Okay, thank you. Now I understand what's going on. A question, Bob, one of the things that's missing off of, I think is missing off the 5-year plan are all the fixes that were identified a number of years ago. And I keep bringing this up, to the staircases and the scenic path and the landing at 8th Avenue down to the beach, which is severely problematic. So would it be possible to add those things, for staff to comb through the shoreline management report that was done maybe 4 years ago? I know you guys fixed some of the staircases in-house, but there's a lot of work that's still on that list that hasn't been done. And even if we're not going to do it, I think there should be a placeholder in this plan for that.
You're correct, Councilman Barron, in that there was the Gravy report did a structural assessment of every one of those stairs. There were some deficiencies. All of what was considered serious deficiencies have been addressed, which is why they're still open. But there's ongoing maintenance, and there's some minor repairs that are still needed. Yes, it could be on the 5-year plan. I'm not concerned about it imminently, because all the serious repairs have been made.
Well, there are two things, not to belabor this point, but there are two things that are serious. The 8th Avenue landing dropped 6 inches over the course of that landing, and it's a complete slippery fall hazard down at the bottom of 8th Avenue onto the beach. And I've been talking about it, and I think I bring it up once a year at these budget discussions. And it's a $20,000 fix, because the whole landing has to be replaced and the stair has to be replaced. And I'd really like it to appear. And there's a serious gap in the pathway somewhere around 9th or so, that's being caused by a huge cypress tree ring that just seems to get worse every time it rains. And it really, so those two things are, if they weren't serious 4 years ago, they're now serious. Last year we talked about a backup like a multi-hookup for a backup generator. And I remember this because this was the thing that I voted no on. And I'm wondering, the council Carrie's laughing at me. The council decided to move forward with it. Again, I was the only no vote, but I'm not sure whether that was done or whether it's fallen off of the project list. And I would like to make sure that we haven't lost it.
Are you referring to it was going to be a portable generator, and we were going to do transfer switches at City Hall, libraries, and have it on having the generator on a trailer and then hook it up?
Yeah, it was something I didn't think. It was something I voted no on, but it was the council's will. And is it on here somewhere?
It is the $60,000 in the 5-year.
Oh, backup generator for IT, that's it. And that includes the transfer switches and all that?
Well, the transfer switches would be more, that project morphed back and forth several times. The main concern is really the backing up the IT equipment at the basement of the main library. That's the main concern. The others would be an upgrade. So we could certainly increase the value to include those transfer switches.
Well, it was the transfer switches that specifically that I objected to, because I thought that staff just wouldn't make the decision about where this thing was going to be. And I thought that staff wanted the generator to be mobile, but it sounds like, I'm certainly happy, if staff has decided that there's a fixed place for this generator, I'm certainly happy to abide by that decision, because that's what I wanted. But I would leave that to Dave and Carrie and Bobby to ask you to upgrade that project. I'm just pointing out that I don't think it's the same. I have a question about the storm drain master plan. You said when we looked at this stuff a couple of months ago, you indicated that it was sized for 10-year storms.
That's correct.
And I wanted to make sure, with climate change coming, the storms are going to get bigger.
Right.
And I want to make sure before we start building something, I know we have $100,000 line item on here to start planning to build things. And I wanted to get some assurances from you that we are going to build to the right size, which I think is bigger than what was a 10-year storm a couple of years ago or last year. So are we okay without revising the storm drain master plan? Are we still okay to proceed with this item?
The master plan is standalone. It guides us making the repairs and whatnot. So that plan is actually was well done. The whole system, all our drainage system entirely was designed for 10-year storm. It would take gobs and gobs of money to upgrade or to increase the size and the capacity of our entire system to meet a 20-year storm. So now during the when repairs are made, yes, the increased sizes will be done, but it's a drop in the bucket because the bulk of the system is all 10 years.
So what do you think? And maybe this is a question for next year, but I just want to make sure that we build the right system. I mean, I think, I know that it would cost gobs and gobs of money. I'm parroting this back to you, that it would cost gobs and gobs of money to design for what was last year, a 20-year storm. But I see Carrie grinning again at me. Next year, or 10 years from now, that storm is going to be a 10-year storm. And then our storm drain system isn't going to work. And I don't think anybody wants to, put a pipe in the ground that's built for one size system to have it be undersized, 20 years from now. So I just, that's important to me that we don't have to 20 years from now, that we don't have to redo it. So if we're okay without producing a 1.1 version of the storm drain master plan, then if you're okay, then I'm okay.
Yeah, the plan itself is okay. The pipes in the ground are sized too small. And we're going to have to, I guess we live with it unless we want to truly invest in a lot of upgrades. But the plan
I guess that's a decision that the five of us need to make at some time other than this one.
That's correct.
And finally, a question for Chip on these Ocean Avenue medians. I was walking through these median fences. I was walking through downtown this morning, and some of the islands. And so this is a little bit of an aside. Some of the islands in the median have plantings. There's some ceanothus that's planted in addition to the trees, and there are other things, and that stuff looks really nice. And my question is doing the split rail fence. So I appreciate, and I'm thankful that the CRA is going to fund this project, but is it the right project? Like, as opposed to just planting a whole bunch of ceanothus or some other native plant things in the middle of those medians, which seems to me would be more keeping with sort of the nature of Carmel. I just want to make sure that this project is being vetted for the parameters, which I think are to keep people off the median islands. And we're not just doing the split rail fence because someone's come to us with a pot of money and said, here, do some split rail fencing.
No, there's a rationale and a logic behind the proposal. There will be a vetting process that will include the Planning Commission, maybe Forest Parks and Beach Commission, and the council. But the idea would be to have a split rail fence that winds around the significant landscaping and certainly the trees in the median islands. And then I talked today to one of the proponents, former Mayor White, and there may be additional funding available to enhance the landscaping. The point is to keep people off of the median islands. It's a safety issue. They trample our electrical system. They trip up and break our irrigation system. They kill our plants. So it is a multifaceted idea to solve some ongoing problems, but there will be a very significant process, sir.
Do people are people crossing the islands, or are they sitting on the islands?
Crossing.
They're mostly crossing the islands.
So if we did, yeah, we'll have this discussion later. Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Karen, you have your hand up, and then Bobby.
Yes, I would like to mention that I have volunteered before on that Thursday where the cars parked during Car Week. And it is a zoo trying to keep people off the medians. They climb on it, they stand right on top of the plants, they knock over the light fixtures. They just really abuse the median. So I don't know exactly what this design looks like. They might still jump up on the median and crawl over the fence, but it'll be interesting to see this develop because it is a problem, particularly that week. I don't know on an ongoing basis but certainly during Car Week, it is a definite problem.
Bobby?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Bob, couple questions for you. And up on the top three items that you're saying that are all three urgent items, right? I understand the one is the public works yard filtration system.
This one.
So that currently is a broken system, correct? And so we aren't filtering our water correctly.
It's not entirely broken. It's beyond its last leg. It's hard to maintain. It's hard to get new parts. We have to call the vendor for repairs and wait for parts. So it's been in and out of service for last couple of years.
Well, I understand if it does break down even one day and we leak dirty water, I think that's an urgent problem. Yeah.
We're not violating our stormwater regulations, but we're just not washing things when it's not working.
Okay. And then the other emergency, the fire pump, that's been done basically, right?
If we want to occupy Sunset Center again, we need to fix it.
Yeah. Okay. So then the third one, the greenhouse gas. So I read the AMBAG report today, and it looks to me in this report that it says the city met all of its goals for 2020 and that we need to just start concentrating on 2030, which is 9 years out. And then it said that this is specifically the inventory serves, and it lists a series of things that this study that has been done and paid for has served. So I'm confused on what's urgent about that. Maybe you could help.
Is Anya on the call?
I'm here.
Thanks, Anya. Could you explain that? I know you presented this at the March 2nd meeting, but if you can kind of clarify the difference between the AMBAG model and what we're looking for this project?
Well, no, what I'm looking for is what's urgent about.
Right. So it's the study is part of the climate action and adaptation project that we've been working on and that the committee has been working on. There isn't an immediate requirement for it to happen right away. It would help keep the momentum going for the committee. And the climate action plan would be beneficial when we do our general plan update. So those are the two elements, I think, that are at play here.
Oh yeah, I was just concerned about the urgent. Because I'm concerned about anything that's urgent as well. And anything that's urgent, I think that we need to get it done. I just need to define urgent. Then the other thing, Bob, is the thing down the list a little bit is the wayfinding signs. Now that has to go to planning. Some of these things have to go through planning commission, right? Before we even think about doing them.
Yes, the city council approved it at your last meeting. So we kind of locked in that funding agreement with TAMC. Now we need to actually identify the locations, design the signs, and then present that information to TAMC and to Planning Commission and to Council. And then at that point, we would start installing them. So we're just at the beginning point.
So so the Planning Commission would not be able to not have the signs? We have to have the signs at this point because of our vote last month?
No, if the Planning Commission decided to not recommend the council to let's have no signs, that's an option. And then I would bring that forward to council and say Planning Commission doesn't want any signs and leave it to the council's discretion.
Thank you, Bob.
Other questions? All right, see now, I'll take it out to the public. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item tonight? If you do, if you'd state your name for the record, I'd appreciate it. And also, there's a 3-minute limitation on the testimony. Is there anybody wishing to speak? Somebody's either wanting to speak or they're marching.
Yeah, that looks like it's.
This is Rich. It's Richard Kreitman again.
Go ahead.
So I said I was going to speak again. So something that is not in the plan at all or even mentioned is sidewalks. And I've spoken of this before. I think we have one of the most counterproductive public policies that I've ever heard of regarding the sidewalks downtown. So as a city, we defend all of our commercial property owners from slip and fall lawsuits, which is a good thing. But at the same time, we appear to be relieving them any responsibility of taking care of their own sidewalks. So we say we will repair them, or at least that's what's assumed. And I've run into Dominic, one of our senior public works employees, on his hands and knees, fixing loose bricks in front of some of our businesses. No matter how much we have to put in, we put $175,000 into sidewalks a few years ago. That would take care of, a few hundred square feet. Oh, and let's not conflate replacing concrete sidewalks with unmortared pavers. That's one thing. Repairing hazards is something else. And the sidewalks, as you all know, they're just getting more and more dangerous. More and more people I'm sure the trip and fall suits are still coming in, and these are not false suits. I mean, people are hurting themselves here, and we have members of the community, I know, friends. Jonathan Sapp took a header a couple of years ago. And my recommendation is that we enforce the city code that property owners are responsible for their own sidewalks. We're in the situation of actually subsidizing our commercial property owners, and if there was a group of business people who are less needy for public subsidy, I would say it would be our commercial property owners downtown. So I recommend, in terms of our public works and one of the most visible sidewalks, that we change our policy and we let property owners know I think we should continue to defend slip and fall suits if that's what we wish to do, but let's do it for those property owners who repair their sidewalks and take that out of the public domain and improve our city. Thank you very much.
Richard, thank you. Appreciate it. So anybody else?
Mayor, I think someone else had unmuted their phone, so I'd like to just allow that, a little bit of a delay here.
Sure.
And of course now we might not be, but I do want to give a little bit of a delay just to allow the time. If you're needing to unmute your device, *6 will unmute your device.
Hi, Britt. Steve Dallas.
There we go, Steve. Go ahead.
Hi. Sorry about that. I'm not used to talking to you guys on the phone with muting and unmuting and then trying to watch you guys on the phone and on the YouTube channel. Mayor, Council Member Steve Dallas, you've probably gotten my email and hopefully you've had a chance to read it. I wanted to go over a couple of items that you guys all have brought up during your discussion. Public works projects are always fun to do. I'm sure Bob Harari will tell you, and so will Chip. It's probably one of the most enjoyable things to do at the city, being a council member. But I think you have to remember two big things, and you brought it up at your previous agenda item. And there's still people sacrifices. Our management team, or your management team sacrificed, taking the pay cut. Your police and public safety officials sacrificed, and to hire some of your employees back, because to do some of these projects, you're going to have complete burnout of your public works officials, and you don't have the bandwidth to do it. So I would hope that you would take a step back and look at the police department again and fully fund them. Take care of their management that did sacrifice during the pandemic, and then some of the employees that we did lose. And I believe we're down between, I can't remember, 15 or 20 employees. But again, everybody wants to do public works projects. I know all 5 of you would love to do as many as you can. I think one of the big public works projects, if you look on your chart, is that number 31. I'm sorry, now I lost it myself. That Bob came up with. And it shows just a very minimal for maintenance. And you might want to look and have the staff come back with the real number with that facilities maintenance supplement for old buildings, or I would say for all buildings, because it's substantially more than $25,000 a year. That's not a realistic number in any way, shape, or form, even based on what was given to you guys today, such as police renovation, and as well as your emergency fire pump for the Sunset Center, your yard filtration. So that number should be a realistic number, and a lot of these will fall off that capital improvement project if that would be a number that would help all of you. I know Bob briefly mentioned the ambulance. I'm sorry, not the ambulance, the sweeper. The sweeper is literally our bloodline of our city, just like our ambulance and our fire trucks and our police department. I think all of you remember in December when that sweeper was out 30 days or so, my phone was ringing. I know other council members and other mayors, I'm sure, had their phone ringing. And I would hope that you guys consider, I think the staff did a wonderful job.
Steve, if you'd like another couple of seconds to summarize, you're welcome.
I would just like, thank you, Mayor. I would just like one more minute. I think you're on a great path of, like, you have your ambulance and your radio antennas and things like that, where they take it over a 5-year period. I think that's a wonderful suggestion when interest rates are completely low. And I think you should consider looking into the sweeper, whether it's not in this year or next year, to add that also into that capital improvement project. And I know Mr. Kreitman mentioned just briefly this tax about transfer tax. There's one big thing that every council, including my council and previous councils, Mayor McLeod's and Burnett, we all had one issue, and a lot of them are the day trippers. We are not charging any tax to a day tripper. And I hope this council, I know, is going to start tackling paid parking, and that hopefully it's not just on Del Mar, but also on Ocean Avenue. We have more studies on this, and I hope you all take the time, because it can generate between $750,000 and $1 million, and it will help this community as a whole to do all those projects that Karen likes and Jeff likes and Carrie likes and Bobby likes and Dave likes. And the whole community will enjoy it, and it won't impact the community as a whole. So please take that as, the restaurants compromise, the hotels compromise on tax, the residents compromise, but I hope you all hit the day trippers. We hit the buses. I remember when we jacked up that rate on the buses, Bobby, and I hope you look into it. Thank you very much, Mayor, for your time, and council. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve, for your testimony. I appreciate it. Is there anybody else?
Based on the other phone numbers, that looks to be it as far as phone numbers. I do just want to allow a little bit of a delay just in case. *6 does unmute your device. Most people are attending via video, so they can unmute themselves on their screen. So with that, Mayor, I believe you are probably good to go.
All right, I'll close the public comment period, then bring it back to council for deliberation, directions, additional comments or questions. Council members? All right, Chip, do you want to summarize then what you've heard so far as direction and areas of concern? I mean, Jeff has raised some issues around the ability to get in a specific project that goes back to where we were with reforestation issues. Carrie has expressed concerns about the fact that we've got unsolved issues out there with monies that could be invested in areas of concern. I think we're all pretty much on the same page. Bobby did bring up the issue about the climate change study. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I just want to make sure we're not being redundant. So Bobby, if you have something new that you provided, I'd appreciate seeing that. If it, it's something we've invested a lot of time into, but on the other hand, if it's redundant and we're wasting money there, maybe we could spend the money somewhere else. So whatever that is, I'd like to see that.
Mr. Mayor, we will bring, we'll bring you the detail when you see the operating budget. We will, try to rebuild some money for sidewalk maintenance, as Mr. Kreitman pointed out, and for our green infrastructure. You'll see that in the budget as well. As a reminder, the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem have approved the draft agenda for the April meeting, and you will receive a presentation on paid parking. There's no decisions at that meeting, but again, we'll kind of take a look from Mr. Swanson and Chief Tomasi about where we've been. And then, if you want to proceed, we can tell you kind of the route to go. But that certainly has the potential to bring in new revenue. But again, you'll see a lot more detail on the budget when we present the operating budget in the next several weeks.
Excellent. Bobby, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps the city could put the AMBAG study on the city website. Chip, would that be possible? Mayor, would that be okay?
Okay with me. I don't see. I mean, it's a public information item. It's fine with me. Yeah. I have no idea what it looks like, so yeah, I'd like to see it.
It's about 15 pages, and it just was completed in December of 2020. So I think it has some pretty pertinent information.
All right, Carrie, you've got your hand up.
Okay, just to kind of summarize, and to keep in mind that last city council meeting, we had a nice, Agnes gave us a nice talk about the climate study. And AMBAG study was great, but now we have to plan for the future. So that's what the climate study is about. And so if you also want to take a look at what AMBAG came and presented that study to the Climate Action Committee, and that's on the website. So there was discussion about why they did a great job of what we've been doing, but now we need to move forward. So I just want to clarify that.
Good, I appreciate that.
So I just want to summarize what Bob's got up here. I'm fine with the confirmation to proceed with the 3 urgent projects. I am fine with what the 13 projects that Bob has suggested for 21-22, and I'm suggesting we make up that 340,000 that we're short in the budgeted amount from the surplus we have. And in terms of, so I just want to, I'm looking, I think we do need to move forward with some salary adjustments, as I mentioned before. And that could also come out of the surplus. Obviously, people have made sacrifices. We appreciated it when they did. And considering that we're over budget, we didn't need their sacrifice, so we need to make them whole, as I've stated before. I think some of this ground that we can make up here is from the surplus of this year. So I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Well said. Karen?
Yes, I am supportive of the confirmation to proceed with the 3 urgent projects. And I do support the 13 projects, but I have to make notice that the 13 projects after that are sort of the kinds of things that might excite engineers. And no offense, Bob, but we gotta have some things that excite our residents. We really do need to put in some more money and come up with some of these other projects that should go forward. Because we all live in this town, we want to enjoy this town. And, you know, yes, I want the storm drains to work, and yes, I want potholes taken care of, but that is not what excites me about living and walking around and enjoying our village. The scenic pathway and some of our, you know, improving the medians down Ocean Avenue, beautifying our town, making us proud of our town. Some of those projects have got to make the list, and we have money there to do it. And I hope that we can move beyond just, you know, radios and vehicles and storm drains and get some of those sexier projects on the list. Thank you.
Karen, maybe you could add in some projects that you'd like to see that could be added onto that agenda for the next meeting. That'd be great.
Yes, I would. And I also know the Scout House has been kicked around and worked around for years and years and years, but I really would like to see more information about why we're doing this renovation. What are we going to use the Scout House for? So that we're not just putting money into it that will not do anything to actually accomplish anything. If there are purposes behind it, I want to hear about it.
We have some contemporary documents, council member. We'll republish those.
Thank you.
I think that's a good question too, Karen. I mean, as a new member on council, you know, priorities can change, and you've got the ability to go ahead and get up to speed on and see what you are thinking. So I appreciate that. Jeff, in closing, did you have any thoughts on the direction?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I agree with pretty much all of what Carrie said and what Karen has said. I would add a couple of things. First, I would add, you know, the bike lane median islands, you know, Barbara Livingston project. You know, I asked Chip. I think that can be included in our roadway budget, our $500,000 project, and I would ask that be made part of that project, and maybe the lowest hanging street that could be postponed by 1 year is postponed by 1 year, so we can get that project done. You know, the city has accepted that money. I know the project is contentious. Every project in town is contentious, but the city has accepted that money. The project is done. The project is mostly designed, and I think we should move forward with it. I think we eventually will move forward with it, and I don't see why. This seems like an appropriate time to move forward with it and just bump a project off the list. I would also, there's $150,000 for the sea level rise study. You know, this is the marquee item on the climate change committee's agenda, and I understand that it's more than the $55,000 that was budgeted, but it was always going to be more than the $55,000 that was budgeted, apparently, according to Anya. So I'm not sure where the $55,000 number came from a couple of years ago. But, you know, the climate change, you know, the committee is prioritizing the problems that Carmel is going to have. And as Chip pointed out, a couple of, an hour or two ago, when we did the drainage study, you know, that produced a whole laundry list of drainage items that we have to contend with as a village. And whether we like it or not, those are all issues. And I think the climate change committee is doing basically the same thing. And we're at the point where, you know, our goal is to figure out the way that things are going to impact the village and try to prioritize. You know, we're basically at the point of starting to prioritize the list of remediations, how we think about, the risk of sea level rise versus the risk of higher temperatures versus the risk of bigger storms, on our power grid and the seawalls and all that stuff. And we can't do that without that money. We can't, we're operating in the blind if we don't know how much sea level is going to rise and where the areas of the beach are going to be hard hit, whether the Santa Lucia bathrooms are going to fall into the ocean, or whether the Del Mar bathrooms are going to basically roll down the hill. If you go over there, you'll see that there's already 5 or 6 feet of sand missing from around those cypress trees. That bathroom is just going to roll down the hill into the water. We need to figure out what the problem is. And I hear Bobby when he says that things aren't urgent. And I appreciate that. But by the same token, the drainage study isn't urgent either, because none of that's going to happen tomorrow unless it does. And the sea level rise study is important for the same reason. We don't know when it's going to, what we know is that sea level is going to rise 4 or 5 feet, and we don't know when it's going to happen. And if we don't do that work now, we will never do that work. It'll be the next climate change committee that's doing that work. And that will be 3 or 4 years from now. And we'll be 3 or 4 years, down the road before we're able to do that. So I would ask that project be moved into the list of 13 projects for, I don't know what we're going to do, whether we're going to have a project by project up or down vote, but I would ask that project be moved to that list. I would say that we could lower the dollar amount on the project. I know that Chip and Agnes have sort of thrown a spitball at the wall and tried to guess. And I would say we could lower the dollar amount of the project to, say, $100,000 and come back to the council if the number is more. But I would like to see it. I would like to see it discussed, and I would like to see it voted on at some point. That would be my ask with respect to that. And then I still would like to go back to the fact that we have a $2.6 million surplus and figure out how to program that money. I think we should have a discussion about that. Mm-hmm. And part of that programming could be to replace more than the $140,000 worth of projects that we have on our plate right now that we're going to talk about next month. And we could, we could do that, by my mind, we could do that one of two ways. We could either increase the CIP that we're going to vote on next month, and we could advance a few of the 13 projects that we're gonna do next year, or we could just we could have a sort of a gentleman's agreement to increase the capital improvement project budget for the next fiscal year, and take some of that money out of the reserves that we're going to put into the reserves, this year. At the end of this year. So I'd be happy either way, but I would like to see, to Karen's point about doing something for the residents, and to my earlier point about funding that police station. And I would say, I'm sure Kara's going to smile at me again. The police station is not my favorite project in the world. It's not, it's not sexy. It's a complete public works project, but it really is something that needs to be done. And we can't wait. I don't think we can wait 5 more years to do this project. I think that's just, that's like poor stewardship on our part. And so, it would, God, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I just hate saying this, but we have this money, we have this $2.6 million, and I think that's a possible use of it. We could knock it out and it would just not bother us again. But I think we owe it to the police department and to that just decrepit building to figure out a way to advance that project. I don't know what else to say, but I think that's important. Thank you.
Okay, Karen and Carrie, you both have your hands up. Bobby did put his hand up. Are you wanting to say something new, or did you not take him down? All right, so Carrie, you had your hand up first. I think, and then Karen.
So I appreciate Jeff's comments in terms of the sea level rise project, because that is going to be huge in planning what we need to do to our beach and the bluffs to help save them for sea level rise anticipations here. So that's going to work into our capital budget, and we're going to need to plan for that. I'd also wanted to mention the project manager. I want to know how many of these projects are going to be needed to be project managed, and if Bob does need somebody. I also want take a look at that 715,000 chip. I think we need to do something special with that. So I'd like the staff to come back and make some suggestions, and take a look at the FTEs. You know, that we cut 20. What would your be priority in bringing a few back? So I wanted to add to that, Mayor. Thank you.
Excellent. Karen, then Bobby.
Yes, I also see the need for the sea level rise study. And I wondered if staff could also check out hiring a grant writer. We used to have a grant writer on staff at one time, and I see Chip shaking his head, but there may be a lot of grants coming forth to help us deal with drainage issues and sea level rise and climate change. And we should try to be in the position to take advantage of that. And it may put undue burdens on our staff to ask them to be out searching for grants that are possibilities. So I'd just like to hear more about that, because sometimes a little bit of money invested can pay off in a big way in a lot of different directions. There are, whenever you do pavement projects and so on, there are usually mitigation grants available for some of those things. So I think we could be missing the boat by not having a grant writer on staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Bobby?
Okay, well, I guess I'm the unpopular one tonight because I am just not ready to open up the coffers and let all these projects in. I don't know how we're going to come out of COVID. I mean, we're all hopeful, but just last meeting, we didn't want to have a July 4th party. And so I'm just not ready to open our checkbook up like this. And as far as sea level goes, while I know that is an important project, I think that we once again should look to our region. COD just did one in 2018. They did a sea level report. Can we use it? Is it possible? Can we reuse or repurpose anything that is done within our region and not our square mile? So I would like staff to look into that. And Chip, maybe we can put that report on our website, because they've offered it to us. I know it's long. It's a 350-page document, but maybe the answer lies within. Maybe we have these things. And there's the only thing that, I mean, there's a couple items that I would take off of this, because I don't think as the one, there was only 3 urgent items, and I really just don't feel one is urgent. I think that it's urgent by the year 2030. And then but the one thing I would like to see put on here somewhere is wildfire fuel reduction. That's the thing that probably scares me the most, is if we were to have a fire in Mission Trails or anywhere, but Mission Trails, I was in there today, and they've done a great job getting some of that underbrush out, but it's still, there's so much to be done in there. And so I would like to see some money come back into this budget for wildfire fuel reduction. Thank you.
So before Karen, your hand is still up. Did you have something else?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
It's my understanding, and I've talked to board members at COD, that they did not do the sea level rise that we would need, because they did not concern themselves with Carmel Bay. They were just concerned with the area over near their plant. And they asked the city of Carmel to join in with them back when they did their project, and the Carmel city deferred and did not join. So that their sea level rise is specific to them. And, you know, we do have that landmass that comes around the corner, which is different. So, yes, use what we can when we can, but realize that there are parts of our community that are unique and are going to have unique impacts of climate change.
Recognizing that, thank you, Karen, recognizing that this is an item that's not up for decision tonight. Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to add to this fire?
Yeah, I do have a little bit that I'd like to add to the fire, Dave. Thank you for leading me in that way. The COD study, in addition to looking at sea level rise, is way complicated because of the status of the opening and closing of the bay and whether the lagoon is open or closed. And it's also based on the rainfall that happens to be happening because of its situation in the lagoon. So it's really complicated. It costs hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and only a piece of it. It's really a sort of it's a clean sea level rise study, but it's really a climate change study. Only a piece of it actually involves the sea level. A good part of it involves the opening and closing of the bay and the amount of rain that is falling in the last couple of days. So it's a great effort, but it's very specific to them. It doesn't involve seawalls. It doesn't involve the fact that our beach is going to drown or disappear when sea level rise. So we'll be in a situation where years from now, we won't have any beach at all. We'll just have water running up to the seawalls all year. It doesn't have anything to do with the big slope that we have, which will recede back towards San Antonio Road as sea level rise goes up 4 feet. That whole slope is going to destroy. The volleyball courts will all erode and fall into the ocean, and a good part of the North Dunes will fall into the ocean. It doesn't involve the seawalls that we have below, south of the Pescadero Creek, where we have those houses up on the cliffs that are protected by a various amalgam of, homegrown seawalls that nobody's quite sure who owns them or who maintains them. It doesn't, we just have a really different situation, and we're facing a different set of problems than what COD is faced. And the problem is that the geography of our ocean bottom is different here than it is over in Pacific Grove or over in Monterey. So the way that sea level rise affects what happens on our beach is just going to be different than what happens over in Pacific Grove, where their roads are just going to flood. We don't really have roads that are going to flood. At least the point roads may flood. Scenic Road may get wet and collapse, but it's not going to flood. We just have a different set of problems. And to a point that was mentioned a couple of months ago, what the state has done is the state has told us what the climate's going to do. They have not told us what's going to happen to our beach. So this study is not to figure out how much rain we're going to get. It's not to figure out how the temperature is going to change. It's not even to figure out how much sea level is going to rise. We already have that information. This study is to figure out what's going to happen to the physical sand and the physical road and the physical revetments that we have on the beach, as well as what I mentioned before, all of the infrastructure, the bathrooms that we have on the beach, the buried power lines on Scenic Road, the sewer line on Scenic Road, the sewer plant that's at the bottom of 8th that's going to flood. There are a whole bunch of side effects, and that's what we're trying to figure out. What are the side effects from sea level rise going to be?
And Jeff, where is the Coastal Commission in all these discussions? What level of participation have they had?
We haven't engaged the Coastal Commission yet as far as our little discussions, probably half out of fear more than anything else, for fear that we're going to be told what to do. And now I've sort of let the cat out of the bag by saying it in this meeting. I know that Coastal Commission will eventually require us to do something.
Well, their approach to it is what's called manage retreat,
right,
where they're actually dead set against any revetments, any retaining walls, unless it's protection of a public resource. They don't approve a retaining wall or a revetment anywhere. And I think that's an important issue. And I'm not trying to get in an argument at all here.
No,
I actually agree with you. I just think that if you're talking about the mother of all regulatory agencies that's out there that has the most input on this issue, I'd get them involved in your discussions early on.
Yeah, the question, I think, without going the question, Dave, is what's going to happen when the revetments fail? You know, because those revetments, the revetments that we have and the seawalls that we have will at some point in the future fail. And so one of the things that we don't understand is when they're going to fail and what we're going to do when they fail. And all that stuff will require, of course, you know, a coastal commission blessing. And I know that, yeah, I'm a little afraid. I think Dave, you know what I'm thinking, and I'm a little afraid to say it over the air right now.
Well, I would just say that it's important to get them in under the tent and outside the tent, setting fires all around you. So that said, let me just offer my opinions. One of the things that I think is interesting is that we've had no discussion about the cost of reopening local government. And I think that's something we all were concerned about, was we did want to get out there. It's in one of the capital improvement projects listed. It's kind of a minuscule number, but it does go to additional costs, additional services, additional personnel. I think that's something I'm concerned about. I do want to get us back to being better stewards of the public process and getting more and more involved, whether it's opening up our meetings, but more so is just to go ahead and get us more bodies at the counter so you actually interact with somebody personally. The other issues I think are, you know, I don't seriously disagree with anything I've heard tonight. I think it's been a good debate, and I appreciate that. One of the things I would like to say is that it was about a year ago when I stood here and said, I'd never seen a budget this bad, that in all my years, I'd never had to go through this kind of a tortured process. And now we're here, we're so blessed to be able to be in a situation. We actually have the discussion about augmenting services. If we did such a draconian cut, it was very responsible of the council to go ahead and make those decisions. They weren't easy, they were very tough. I actually have Chip look a long-term employee in the eye and say, I'm sorry, but I've got to let you go. That's a hard job to do. But we did it, and now we're in a position that so many other jurisdictions are not. They're not in a position where they made those harsh cuts at the beginning. They're now having to go in death by small slices. That's unfortunate. But I think we did the right thing as a council. We did the right thing by the constituents. And now I think it's time that we go back, and if we can backfill these services, let's do it. On the other hand, I am concerned about the future. You know, this variant seems to be taking over back in Italy, shutting back down. Europe's starting to pop up again. So maybe if we look at these investments, maybe we look at them a little bit more long-term, like I said earlier, perhaps go for this year, augment with an understanding that if next year is better, we'll go ahead and continue that. I don't think we're going to get everything built in one day anyway here. You know, these projects may take longer. So let's put maybe just a little bit longer implementation on the end of it, instead of just saying we're going to go out and build everything right at once. Maybe put it in a 2-year plan as part of a 5-year long range, but let's not go ahead and spend everything we've got right away. And I'm not saying that's what we're doing. It's not what I'm hearing tonight. But I do think we want to be as responsible as we can about it going forward in an unknown future. We did an excellent job of charting a pathway that we had no idea what it was going to look like. We're fortunate enough to be here tonight in this condition, but I am worried about the future still. My guard is not up. My jury's not in. So, yeah. So that said, Chip, you got enough direction? Bob, you all set? Sharon?
That was great. Great discussion. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
All right. I want to tell you guys, I really appreciate the collegial approach to this. We're always going to disagree. That's the art of good government, honestly. But so is communication. I think we're doing well. So thank you all. I appreciate it. That said, we will see you on the 9th. Isn't it the 9th? Yeah. All right. Excellent. And I'll see you tomorrow morning, Chip. All right, guys. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you all.